I'm moving to tinfoil hat territory here, but I have the strong impression that if the spam was coming from the Ethereum Foundation, most developers would have had no problem into fixing that.
These guys were very, very smart in their hiring strategy.
Yeah, instead of fixing a real bug, they changed the documentation on Bitcoin Core to pretend that the bug was a feature.
The problem is that the stewards of this strategic asset evidently do not share the views and ideologies of at least a significant majority of Bitcoin users, and this was brought to light. There is cognitive dissonance happening here by very, very smart people, so there might be something else going on.
It's very healthy that Bitcoiners are questioning the motives, including the economic and financial motives of Bitcoin Core maintainers.
What do you think about the state of Lightning right now?
We spent many years to fight the blockchain scam, but finally it has a use case to defend the freedom of the user.
Hi, Giacomo.
Hello, Francis. Very good to see you.
Very good to see you. We are in Brescia, in Italy. We just finished the BitCare Forum conference.
Yeah.
My first conference where I spoke in Italian. How was my Italian?
Great Italian, way better than my English right now.
Thank you.
Almost 40 minutes in Italian, like the full difficult path speech without any interruption and with a lot of passionate cheerings by the Italian crowd. So very, very effective.
It was really awesome. The crowd is amazing, and probably around 1,000 people. And I think one of the things that struck me is that there's a lot of based cypherpunks maxi in Italy.
Yeah, that's interesting because from one side, the Italian community is just now scattered all around the world. When we started building the community in 2013, 2014, it was big, but then it basically evaporated away from Italy for good reasons, because you cannot do business in Italy because of the taxation, bureaucracy. But that's for maybe also the reason that people that remains, they will be more based.
Yeah.
A little bit like you can find in Eastern Europe after communism, where you have people living in a fucked up system, they tend to be more radicalized to a degree. Yeah. I was not myself expecting 1,000 people in the room of the Chamber of Commerce of Brescia, so like institutional room, cheering, especially when you were pushing non-KYC, self-custody, Bitcoin maximalism, non-compliance, and this kind of stuff.
And even among the, let's call them the more corporate type of Bitcoiners, like I met people who work in the banking sector, I met some lawyers, and they come up to me and they're like, I'm such a fan of what you guys are doing, cypherpunks and all of that. And I think probably more so than other countries that I visited, with all respect to my French, with my French compatriots, I definitely felt like there's like a little bit more hardcore maxi, and I think maybe that's the downstream effect of that little core of Italian Bitcoiners that you were instrumental in kind of like fostering, or it's like you planted seeds in the community 10 years ago.
Awesome.
And you're probably going to be humbled, but I think what you did with the community in Milano and taking leadership in trying to establish a narrative, which is like, this is the values, okay? It's Bitcoin only and cypherpunk, and like the downstream effect is like 10 years later, 8 years later, 7 years later, it seems to have become the framework of everyone here. Like, for example, I think a lot of topic was about corporate Bitcoin versus cypherpunk Bitcoin. Is the corporate Bitcoiners taking over, or is the cypherpunks in control of Bitcoin? And pretty much everybody here seemed to be at least emotionally, philosophically aligned with the cypherpunks.
Yeah, I think we can take some credit, but especially indirect, in the sense that we planted the seeds, but then we went away. Like Federico Tenga was a speaker, he's like, great Italian Bitcoiner, went away. Lawrence Naomi went away. I went to Switzerland. Most of the people went away. But then a new wave of Bitcoiners like Federico Rivi of Atlas 21 or Riccardo and Guybrush of the Bitcoin Italia podcast, they started a new wave of Bitcoin education, and they, instead of just starting a new, they made a reference to us, they called us in the interviews, they pick up where we left. So that's basically allowed our initial message to be rebroadcasted in a stronger way. There may be something to do with paradoxically the COVID situation. In northern Italy, it was one of the places in the West where we had the China-like measures. You could be arrested for walking in the street at evening. So that was everywhere in the world. That was a radicalization event. You had one part of the population becoming full socialist Nazi, and the other part becoming basically full-on rebel libertarians. And I think in northern Italy, with that kind of draconian measures, the split was even harder. So when you are forced basically when you're imprisoned at home, entire population, you question the libertarian cypherpunk themes more, and anything is coming through the Overton window that maybe you will not have accepted just 1 year before.
Of course, and we saw the same thing with Canada with the trucker movement, where we had sort of rebellion against the COVID measures, and all of the people that were around that were not Bitcoiners, that were not necessarily normies, but definitely not cypherpunk Bitcoin maxis. After this movement, they kind of started to gravitate towards Bitcoin for many reasons. One of them was because of the censorship of their bank accounts, but other ones is because all of the Bitcoiners that are kind of like influential in the community were all on the side of freedom during that. So, if you look at the tweets that you were writing in 2020, Save Dean, and all the Bitcoiners, like we were right all along,
Yeah.
So if we're right about COVID, maybe we're also right about
heuristically, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And to be clear, it was not even the majority of Bitcoiners at the beginning. It was a tiny minority of Bitcoiners to
Yes.
remain
Yes.
rational,
Yeah.
but way more. I mean, the ratio was higher than in the fiat world for sure, and also shitcoin world. Like shitcoin world, they were all, even the privacy Monero guys in Prague, they were basically swapping you to enter the conference.
Oh, really?
Well, the Hacker Congress, they were
Yes.
requiring a swap to enter.
Yes.
So even the Ethereum community, let's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
even
yeah.
mention it. So it was a good way to distinguish people driven by principles and people logics and reason, and people driven by just technological hype and novelty effects. People that are super easy to influence about the new technological hype, they are also easy to influence about the new biological moral panic.
Yeah. Speaking of, you seeding the Bitcoin Italian community with originally planting ideas of maximalism and cypherpunk, which today, are spontaneously being adopted by the new wave, like Bitpolito, for example. I
Yeah,
met
that's also,
a lot of these guys
yeah.
in Torino, and seems to be a really nice crowd of younger guys that are kind of taking up the flame of the cypherpunk ethos. We met first time 10 years ago, I think, at the Scaling Bitcoin in Montreal conference. Have
You were different back then.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
also
yeah,
changed.
yeah.
I got older, but you got
Yeah.
more and more.
yeah,
more
yeah, yeah. A lot more facial hair. And I was running at the time the Bitcoin Embassy, which you had the opportunity to visit. And I think both of us during our early Bitcoin career were very interested in the concept of physical Bitcoin hubs, which the Bitcoin Embassy was, and then later BHB became. So what is it you think about physical Bitcoin hubs, which is interesting? Why not fully online digital communities like we have? We can collaborate over Twitter, over Slack. Like, why do we need physical Bitcoin hubs?
That's a very good question. It's a paradox of the cypherpunk idea. We want to fight for a world where people can remain names over the internet, so you don't know each other's location and identity, so you cannot hurt each other. So you have crypto anarchy to some degree. But at the same time, in order to build that, we want to meet physically and know each other physically. That's a risk, and that's also a risk of corruption, a risk of maybe even central point of failure. The government can easily arrest you if you gather physically. It's a giving up the cypherpunk protection to a degree, but it's so much more effective for several reasons. The first one is the bandwidth of communication, not just the purely informational bandwidth, the emotional bandwidth, the trust bandwidth. Building trust over the internet where you cannot really convey emotions, you cannot convey irony properly, you cannot, like, we will talk maybe later about the current dramas in Bitcoin. If you talk online, we look dashier, and if you talk with him face to face. That's a completely different experience. Personal, physical, peer to peer, face to face gathering can create trust, can create cooperation, which is also a double-edged sword. Of course, trust can be abused, but it's also necessary. And also, maybe you can think that with technology, this is going away slowly because we will have some kind of crazy virtual reality in which you can see the facial movements and stuff like that. But what you never have in virtual reality is the scarcity of each other's time. In virtual reality, you have a chat open, but you have other 10, and you can easily open an 11th. So there is nothing salient. Now, I'm here with you. I'm ignoring my phone. Many people are writing us, but we don't care. If we are in a call, we have other opportunity cost of other calls. So unless we really need to cooperate on something very focused, we don't communicate. Physically, we have this salience, we have this kind of serendipity. I remember in Blockchain Lab and BHB, we could come up with open timestamps and RGB over lunch. It was not an intended meeting. It was just having sushi with Peter Todd, Riccardo Casata, and just idea flowing about. It's a completely different thing. Now, we did try with the movement of the embassies. It was the goal, the Tel Aviv, the Montreal embassy, the embassy somewhere else. They tried to create this kind of network of embassy. Didn't work out very well back then. Was messy. Then we tried, because we both created this kind of consultancy business to a degree that were sustainable. What I was doing back then in Italy was basically giving travel, accommodation, food, and entertainment, and work support, logistical support to Bitcoin developers from all over the world in exchange for information. Then my team was extracting this information, packaging the information, selling it to Intesa San Paolo Group, Azimut Group, so the fiat world. So we were selling Bitcoin intelligence with the agreement of the Bitcoin community in exchange for money that we were using to sustain it. So we considered the idea to basically merge together across different countries, but then we didn't finalize, mostly because we all went our different ways. You went into the jungle. I became a father a little bit before you, so we just moved over. But one other thing is that merging stuff, physical places, they tend to have very different regulation, business model, moods, branding. So merging them together integrated way is not impossible. Big chains like the hotel chains or WeWork or this kind of stuff, they kind of did it, but it's hard. Especially for us, it proved to be hard. Now we're trying again because I never worked from my past. So now with Plan B Network, the idea is to create an online community of educational resource, but also physical places. So we started from Lugano. We will now have San Salvador. We opened just right now the Bitcoin base in Tokyo. It was amazing. And we have a Tempo House building in Taipei that we visited last week. Great community in Taipei. They shill liquid everywhere. Adam Beck is like a local Shinto is a local Buddhist or Confucian divinity, and it's incredible. And you spoke about Turin. The Turin community of Bitpolito is super based, and Fulgur just opened, is going to open, this is just bought a building that will be open, that will be fully integrated in a Plan B network. And actually, the presence of this base community in Turin did change the history to some degree, because the Polytechnic of Turin right now, with Plan B Network, we basically cooperated with them to start in February the first master school in Bitcoin and Lightning. So it's not a blockchain school. It's the official master school of the University of Turin is doing Bitcoin and Lightning technology, which is something that was unthinkable 3 years ago.
Yeah, no, it's totally awesome. And so now you have Lugano. There is some a physical hub being built there. You have Turin. You have some in Asia. You have some in Central America. Ironically enough, I was running the Bitcoin Embassy, and it's very hard actually to run a physical hub. The guy who is going to run the hub in Torino, I just told him, shake his hand. I'm like, good luck, man. It's going to be a hell of a ride for many years. It's very difficult, so I have a lot of respect for people who are doing these physical initiatives. They are not LARPing. There's a lot of people LARPing on Bitcoin on the internet who are actually not doing stuff, and like the people on the ground who are doing the work is very, very difficult. I also have been pulled back against my will into building a physical hub. So, we started an office
We always go back
in
there.
Bitcoin jungle, and now, based on the overwhelming demand, I think we're going to be working more on a private club, a private country club for Bitcoiners, which is kind of like what we wanted with BHB a little bit. It's like a private thing where there is a filter where not everybody can come in, so you
Yeah,
feel comfortable
yeah.
in sharing.
Invite based,
Absolutely.
elite based, not just a place where you just gather or whatever.
And
The problem, yeah,
you mentioned RGB, for example, and you know, Bolt 11 came out to a large degree from the physical interaction.
I would say the whole bolt
Yeah,
specification, not just the 11.
yeah,
So before the Milano meeting of, so we pulled together in Milan Async, Blockstream, Lighted Labs, Amico Pay, Bitfury because they were building a light implementation, and BitPay. And we said you don't come up, you cannot come out until you have an interoperability. And then Rusty Russell wrote the Milano Protocol, and the Milano Protocol became the Bolt
yeah.
up to 11. So 1, 2, 3 up to 11. So the entire Bolt specification for Lightning came out from gathering these people into a physical place. So that was a big deal.
And there was, I remember when I visited the hub, there was open timestamp, client-side validation research, RGB. There was a bunch of people working on Liquid and Blockstream. Lawrence was there. And it's really funny because even like 7, 8 years later, this group, like I still use the software that was built there. I still use open timestamp. I use LWK in Bolt Bitcoin. We use Elements. And these people were working on different projects. Some of them merged, and like there was a lot of technology. And I think, Lightning, Liquid, and now Ark. I kind of want to talk a little bit about that. So, Lightning and Liquid were born out of this collaboration of a lot of Italian, actually, developers. And now another Italian developer is coming to save the day. As I said, we met at Scaling Bitcoin conference in 2015. 10 years later, we still have the same questions coming up. We have the same panels at the same conferences over and over again. It's like the Ents in Lord of the Rings, that are making very slow decisions over time.
Yeah.
So before we get into like Ark, let's talk a little bit about Lightning, because you were involved very early on, and we also became, I guess, more friends than we were through the scaling wars, and because we were sharing very similar ideology, and we were bouncing ideas off of each other, and we put a lot of faith in Lightning being the solution. And what is the state of Lightning as you see it today? Is it a failure? Is it a success? Is it in its final form? What do you think about the state of Lightning right now?
I think technologically it's an incredible success. I do pay with Lightning every day, non-custodial, to non-custodial, in many shops in Lugano. When I was moving to a few months to El Salvador, I did the same in El Zonte. Few shops, some of them use custodial, but still I do use non-custodial Lightning every day. So it's an incredible success. I can pay instant, almost zero fee, with immediate security. The problem, the failure, I think, was to some degree in communication. In the inner circle, we knew about the limitations of Lightning back then. We knew about the onboarding problem, about the fact that if fees are very high, even opening a channel becomes an expense. We knew about the rebalancing issues. We knew about most of the things since the white paper itself, and we discussed that with Tadeusz. We discussed that with Christian Decker. So it was not surprising to us. But the problem is that probably also because of the war we were fighting to promote the off-chain alternative to the unfeasible and
we may have exaggerated a little bit the promise
marketing-wise. we could have sold the end of the end of times. Like okay, Lightning as is solves everything.
Yeah.
Now about the current state and the ultimate form, I think that Lightning, the other failure in communication, I think, was that we failed to, also from the terminology point of view, to explain that Lightning is two things, not one. One is the DRIA Pool Lightning Channel. It's a construct between two parties that requires an on-chain transaction to onboard and then to close only to people. You have to rebalance it. It has a lot of drawbacks, and it's something. Then there is the Lightning Network, which is a swapping and routing across several channels. That's a separate thing. I think that the first thing is now becoming not obsoleted, but coadjuvated and basically helped and to some degree replaced in some use cases by other things that are basically other things in a spectrum of security. I think that the main point that we have to realize, and that we did realize but without communicating it well, is that security has a cost. And if you have 1 cent, you cannot build a giant citadel with super laser and sharks with lasers and mercenaries for 1 cent. You do that for $1 billion, not for 1 cent. So now we have different security models. We can have full custodianship, which is bad. We can have e-cash, which is slightly better because the custodian cannot run away with your money. They have to rug pull everybody else, and you have more privacy. It's slightly better. Then we have liquid, which is the same, but plus with some interoperability with Bitcoin, which is good for development and research and keeping a very tight and consistent technological stack. And you cannot do fractional reserve, which you can do in Fedimint, for example. Then you move to something like the state chains, like Mercury layers or Sparks. Is the coordinator cannot rug pull you, unlike in Liquid, but they can collude with the previous owners to double spend you, just like the miners. But it's a more centralized kind of coordinator. Then you move to Ark. Probably in between, we could have something like what shitcoiners call roll-ups, places where the coordinator cannot even collude with the previous spenders. They can just censor you. Then you move to Ark. Ark is really a non-custodial security model. So you have some windows of trust in Ark. Immediately, until the next block, you have trust. Then you don't have trust anymore, just like on-chain. Then after 2 weeks for the liquidity recovery of the coordinator, you have trust again. So it's a good compromise. Then you have a DRIA pool Lightning channel, which is way safer than an Ark, because Lightning channel is instant security, unlike the Ark, and it's long-term security, unlike the Ark. And then you have on-chain. Now the Lightning network for me is not DRIA pool. The Lightning network currently is the invoicing, routing, swapping standard across all of these. When you use Fedi to pay, you will show a Lightning invoice. Then, if you are in the same mint, you will just use a cash. If you are not, you will do a Lightning payment across a DRIA pool channel between the mint. In the future, the mint could connect with ARCs instead of DRIA pool, or if you use Aqua or the new Breeze nodeless SDK, you use Liquid because you don't want to maintain channel, then you swap in and swap out from Liquid. And if you use bolts, you can pay on chain and all this kind of stuff. So Lightning, if Lightning is the DRIA pool channel, I think it would be obsoleted, or anyway, it would be complemented very soon. If Lightning is the standard of the lingua franca of the Bitcoin payments, I think that's an unequivocal success.
And it obviously is the way that it works currently. For example, I've been working on a Bitcoin wallet that's been my dream for many years, and then I had this idea to build an LDK like Phoenix, fully self-custodial wallet, and I tried. And credit to Phoenix.
Yeah, Sank team is incredible.
Because
they made it work.
Phoenix is as good as we could ever have hope for a self-custodial mobile UX on Lightning to have. And when I was building it, I realized there's so many problems with self-custodial Lightning. The one being, just-in-time channels, opening, sure, but if you're receiving $5 and someone's opening a $100 channel, you receive another $100. Now you have to open another channel, another channel, and this discovery was happening at the same time where the first spam attack happened, right? Yeah. So the unscalability of this model was like in the back of we kind of all knew that it was not scalable, but then once the fees are $50, there's nowhere to hide anymore, right? Self-custodial just-in-time channel opening does not scale. And then I realized, okay, well, what if we pre-purchase a channel? Okay, that's great. But imagine you have 1 million users that are each pre-purchasing a $2,000 channel. That is going to cost a lot of liquidity. And okay, how much are people? So the LSP maybe will borrow Bitcoin and charge a fee. Fine. How much would you require from an LSP to lend them the Bitcoin? I would not lend my Bitcoins for almost any price, but I think the market price will probably be around 6 to 10% or something around that. So that cost obviously has to be passed on to the users. Okay, so I'm like in my bed at night thinking about all these things, and I'm like, are we going to have to build a custodial wallet? Like, are we at this juncture in the world? And then I had a flash where I was like, what if we build a liquid wallet? So then I started my whole journey with bolts and building the same kind of concept as Aqua. And then I also work with a custodial wallet provider in Costa Rica, which is Bitcoin Jungle. So now I can see, for example, between Bull Bitcoin and Bitcoin Jungle, we have massive channels. We do instant settlement. It works 100% of the time. So if you have a lot of, and of course, Bolts being a massive Lightning channel operator, the payments between Bolts, Bitcoin Jungle, Bull Bitcoin, and like large node operators, eCash mints are going to be large node operators, Fedi mints are large node operators and stuff. They're actually working like really, really well at instant settlement. But of course, the problem with Liquid is that it's very hard to try to market Liquid as being a second layer of Bitcoin. It's not a second layer of Bitcoin. I call it a Bitcoin stablecoin. Right, it's a Bitcoin stablecoin.
Interesting.
It's a fully different coin that's backed 1-to-1 by Bitcoin, and the fact that it can be audited means it's very great. But of course, there's no unilateral exit, and I think we are arriving slowly at a concept of, well, if you don't have unilateral exit, or a high probability of having cheap unilateral exit, then it's not Bitcoin, and that's where I think Ark is getting me so excited. And the guy who is building Ark was also involved with Liquid, Marco Angitieri. Was he a part of BHB?
No, he was not.
He wasn't?
He's part of a younger generation.
Okay.
I met Marco for the first time in the Munich Lightning meetup run by Fulmo in 2019 or something. So pretty recently. No, well, maybe 18, but still not much ago. And he was part of the community looking up to Lawrence, to Ricardo, but he was not part of the team.
Okay.
And now he's in Lugano with us. So now we are trying to recreate the BHB lab in Lugano, and he's there. To give the correct credit, the idea of Ark is coming from Burak, that is now working on some kind of theoretical reinvention of the idea. But Marco is not just a very good developer; he's also a market guy. He's very good at execution as well.
Of course, and you can talk about protocols, but what really matters is like, show me the mobile app. Okay, show me the mobile app, or it doesn't exist, right?
Or the SDK that will be integrated with
show
the current
me the SDK.
mobile.
And by the way, I had the chance of getting an in-person demo from Marco yesterday about Ark. I can guarantee that it is not vaporware. Okay, so Ark definitely exists, and I think
let's try to not repeat the same mistake. Ark is not the silver bullet killing everything, mostly because it also has a liquidity cost.
Yes.
The trustless part of Ark requires the Ark provider to front all the amounts of the transaction within the round. That's a high liquidity cost, so it's not zero. But if you think about again the connection of all this spectrum, Marco is saying that the current Lightning channels, Riapun, are more like Swift, which is what we were describing before, by basically settling among different kind of security models. And then Ark is closer to MasterCard and Visa because it can work that way. And then for real microtransactions, probably you still have to go a little bit cheaper with state chains or Liquid or Cashew. Speaking about Liquid, I fully agree with you. There is a problem to perceive it as an extension of Bitcoin for, I think, at least two reasons. One, like eCash, is the security model. Is not a guarantee. I still have to trust somebody to give it back to me. But the second is also the history of Liquid is complex because it started created by one company, Blockstream. So it was identified with the company. And for regulatory reason, it was very difficult and still is very difficult for the company to give away their responsibility. For example, they tried to tell the federates that now they could take the fee instead of Blockstream. But if the federates take the fee, now they are more liable for maybe signing a block that may contain money laundering. If they sign blocks blindly, but they don't get any money from it, then they can defend themselves in a certain way. If they take money out of settling a transaction that may be considered illegal, then they are sharing responsibility. So right now, Blockstream is keeping the fee, which they will use as a deposit to pay the on-chain fee of the Ampeg, which is cool, but it gives it gives the feeling that it's still like some kind of proprietary network. It's very hard to detach Liquid. Like you can dislike Elizabeth Stark and use a Light implementation. It's hard to have a Blockstream hatred and use Liquid.
I think why people were so excited about Lightning and Arc right now is because, okay, so the first scaling problem was identified on day 2 by Halfini, or maybe not day 2, but very, very
Very
early
soon.
on, when he said, okay, well, this obviously will not scale, so what is probably going to happen is there will be Bitcoin
Bitcoin
banks,
banks, yeah.
right? The first scaling debate, it was like, well, we have two strategies. It's either bigger blocks or it's Bitcoin banks, and it was kind of seen as being a binary solution. Either we centralize Bitcoin at the chain level by making validation more expensive with Bitcoin blocks and by creating a hard fork, or we centralize Bitcoin at the institutional level where these Bitcoin banks are holding everybody's Bitcoin and clearing with each other. And then Lightning just came out as like this dark horse, which is like, no, actually, we can scale Bitcoin without the concept of Bitcoin banks. And Ark is very similar concept. You can scale Bitcoin without having custody, whereas stuff like Liquid is a sophisticated Bitcoin bank. Cashew is not as sophisticated, but still pretty. It's
It's
a
a
good.
base form of Bitcoin bank
It's a
because
nice Bitcoin bank.
yeah, you cannot
It's
censor users individually,
right,
which is very cool.
right. And of course, we have the actual Bitcoin banks, which is going to be Bitcoin Jungle, Blink, Galoi, Wallet of Satoshi, which are the least bad ones, and then the really bad ones, like obviously Coinbase and the other ones, and then the even worse ones, which are like the ETFs and the microstrategies and stuff like that, which are not even Bitcoin. They
A
are
second level of risk on top of Coinbase.
right, exactly. So I think that's why like Lightning got us so excited because it's like it's a completely out of scope scaling solution, which is not the Bitcoin bank, not the bigger blocks, and like Arc also I think is getting us very excited. But that's always been my philosophy. I've become a little bit stoic in Bitcoin. When I see guys like Marco and when I see guys like the people who built Liquid and I see the people who are building the Lightning Network that are now building RGB, that are building state chains. People are actually building solutions. There is no ossification of the Bitcoin ecosystem because people are definitely. I was talking to Marco last night, and he said something which I really appreciate, which is not all problems are solved by protocol. You can solve some problems with UX, with a really nice UX, which is what we did with Lightning also, with the just-in-time channel opening and all sorts of stuff, and backups and green light from Blockstream and all sorts of things. So you can solve problems with app-level UX that are not, maybe we don't need CTV for Arc, right? Because maybe the trade-offs of not having CTV for Arc can be highly mitigated with a really nice user interface and a user flow.
And a good distribution
Yeah.
of risks among
Yes.
the users with a rational distribution.
Right. And good communication and an ecosystem of service providers that offer services which minimize which try to minimize the trust as much as possible at every kind of corner of this ecosystem, so that even though it's not fully trustless, there is some risk involved with something like Arc, or there is some risk involved with just-in-time channel opening, for example. It's not risk-free, but
Well, to be fair, a Bitcoin on-chain transaction is not risk-free.
That's true.
You have a risk of reorg for a few blocks, and in case of heavy 51% attacks, you may have a risk of reorg with 100 blocks. So, I think the problem is that either you go in the ideological position that there is total trustlessness or just Coinbase, and that's wrong. Or you say that since there is not such a sharp division, then any kind of trust system or trust model is the same, and we should not even strive for more sovereignty. The reality is that there is a spectrum, but we should go the further in the direction of sovereignty and unilateral exit and trustless as much as possible for the use case.
Yeah. And I have this presentation which I did in Madeira, which is like, again, this scope of or this scale of trustlessness, and there is like a kind of zone of acceptability which is emerging, which is different for some people. But for example, I consider Liquid to be in the zone of acceptability based on the alternatives that we have. Okay, so for most people right now, the experience of Lightning, it's Phoenix, it's Bull Bitcoin or Aqua model, Breeze model, or it's Watt of Satoshi. Yeah. Phoenix is the least compromise, but also the hardest to master and the harder to use. And then you have Walt of Satoshi on one end, which is super easy, strike, zaps, whatever, it's fun, it's great. So there is like this zone of acceptability, which I think Liquid is part of it. And I think Ark is going to be even closer to the zone of acceptability.
Yeah, may not replace it, but it will give us another block in this kind of spectrum, so that the market will be able to settle down into the sweet spots in the Goldilocks zone of the spectrum. Also, we have to notice that some of this discussion is technical, some of this is legal. Our main attacker is the government that will try to censor and confiscate, and the government, even if it's based on arbitrary power, is also based on some level of procedurality. So they will follow to some degree some laws. Then they can change them, they can violate them, but they will tend to follow some regulations, which means that you can have regulatory arbitrage windows. For example, Tether with USDT or even more USD Tether Gold, XAUT, that's exactly like eGold, same. But eGold was shut down because they went to the company and said, you are trading gold credit in your database, stop. While Tether is, to anonymous people on the internet, while Tether is saying, well, regulator, I'm trading to a primary market with full KYC, AML, only qualified investors. Then, due to the blockchain technology, they have a secondary market where we cannot stop them, unfortunately. We can just blacklist when they come back. So it's not our fault that we control the primary market, but the secondary market is free, which is a very nice shitcoin scam to the regulators. It's a perfect kind of a regulatory arbitrage. And to some degree, Liquid is similar, because now as an app like Bull Bitcoin or Aqua, they can say, the regulator comes to Wallet of Satoshi and they say, you have to give up the Bitcoin. They say, okay, or you shut down. And they go to Aqua and Aqua say, wait, I don't control it at any level. Liquid is. Now, Liquid is also an entity, but it's another entity, another jurisdiction. So the attack surface for the regulator to shut down becomes smaller and more complicated to pursue.
Actually, and is Liquid even a custodian, or is Liquid guaranteeing a peg, right? Because technically, when you use Liquid, you don't have you don't have Bitcoin, you have LBTC. And the promise that Liquid does is we will buy your LBTC for the price of 1 BTC. You will let you redeem it, and
That's it, but that's also true for Wallet of Satoshi to some degree. You can say Wallet of Satoshi is just keeping a credit for you and redeeming it, maybe.
True.
I think that the biggest difference that you are delegating that to another entity.
But it's the difference is it's a blockchain,
Right,
and everybody
exactly.
knows that blockchains are decentralized and you cannot control them.
The blockchain scam, that's the beauty of it.
Yes.
We spent many years to fight the blockchain scam, but
actually,
finally it has a use case to
yes,
defend the freedom of the user.
yes,
Regulatory
exactly.
arbitrage by confusing the regulators.
Yes. So okay, we met at Scaling Bitcoin. We were all a little bit stressed out and concerned about the scalability of Bitcoin 10 years ago. How do you feel do you feel bullish? Do you feel optimistic?
Super optimistic.
Okay.
Right now, I think
Bitcoin is not dead?
not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Still
And probably
works?
it will outlive me at this point, which is good to know.
Fantastic.
And the Lightning Network in this new meaning of the swapping, invoicing, routing standard of Bitcoin, I think is at this point is the solution. It's just that is the solution, but it's composed to a lot of local solution that we will still figure out for many years, and it's beautiful.
What's interesting about Lightning becoming the settlement layer, which is kind of ironic because we thought that main chain was the settlement layer and Lightning was the payments layer, is that did not happen. That was not planned at BHB. It was not planned at the Scaling Bitcoin conference. It was not planned on Twitter. It spontaneously emerged as being, people started to use it as a settlements layer, and it doesn't matter how me or you or Twitter tries to frame it. It is how it's being used quite successfully, spontaneously by businesses all over the world that never discussed, maybe we should make Lightning our settlement layer. It just happened. So it's very organic and it's very healthy to have this kind of chaotic, multiple solutions and people trying different things. And for example, when I first saw Fedimint and Cashew, I immediately started to attack Cashew as being it's the worst of both worlds. It's custodial and it's also you need to have your backup and this and that. And I met Calais in person and I was like, you know what? Actually now it's like fine. Let's all experiment and it's all part of this experimentation process.
Especially if I may, if the experiment is well marketed to be attached to some level of amount with some level of risk. So if you tell people to experiment with Cashew with $1 million, that's craziness, that's irresponsible.
Of course.
But the good thing we were discussing last night, Blitz wallet is a nice experiment.
The auto swap out.
Auto swap, right? If you can have wallets where your wallet locally will decide. If it's small, it cash. If it's bigger, you go liquid. If it's bigger, you go maybe state chain like Spark. If it's bigger, you go Ark. If it's bigger, you open a channel like Phoenix. If it's bigger, on chain.
And Zeus also has this concept, and of course, I'm going to put that in the Bull Bitcoin wallet. Also, auto swap out of liquid. Something also that we are considering implementing even in the Bitcoin Jungle wallet. To at some point, there's a max. There's a max custodial balance, and then it swaps to self-custody. And this is because the Bitcoin builders ecosystem is driven by high level of integrity, high level of moral, ethical codes, where guys like Calais and Cashew, for example, is marketing his solution correctly, being very particular about talking about the trade-offs. Same thing with the Ark guys and every builder that I think we also learned, as you said, from Lightning, that we have to be very clear and concise about the trade-offs. And of course, it's difficult to make a user understand the trade-offs. So for example, in the Bull Bitcoin kind of user interface and user experience, you have to automatically select some networks and some security models based on the amount, because if you ask the user, would you like this security model or that security model, you're gonna fucking fry their brains, right? And they don't know that based on a certain amount or not. What are the odds that Liquid will fail within the next couple of years and you will lose your money? They are relatively low, but they're not zero. So is keeping $1,000 on Liquid for a few months or maybe a year a very, very high risk? I mean, there's a lot more risky things in life than doing that. You're much more likely to get your fucking wallet stolen from your car than there's nothing that's risk-free in life. So the idea of making some opinionated decisions in the end user product, and this is how the end user products will differentiate themselves, is by having opinionated decisions on what is the auto swap levels and how it's determined.
And especially that will improve this kind of opinionated cell auto swapping on the Lightning level. Universal language will help a lot the problem of invoicing, because right now if you go to El Salvador, you say, can I pay with Bitcoin? That's already a friction. Then they have to tell you which Bitcoin, because if it's a restaurant, it's Lightning. If it's a car, maybe you want on chain. And in the future, maybe you want on chain, you want Ark, or you want Spark, or you want Liquid. There are like 4 different addresses, which is something I'm very bullish about Ark. Tiero started with a new format address, just like Liquid, and instead now they're doing just BIP21 universal invoicing.
Greatest invention of Bitcoin is BIP21.
Agreed.
It's so good.
All the invoices should be BIP21 with the optional Bol 12. And then from there, you go wherever you want. Because Bol 12 just means ask my server, and we can do a pay join, we can do whatever we want. While the fallback on chain is my server is unavailable, you have to do a sync.
We're going to have 9 components to these BIP21s, and we're going to have the single QR code, and
hopefully for Nostr as well. Why npub? Just show me a code. So I'm at your restaurant. You show me a code, that's also your Nostr. So I can also follow your restaurant if I want. And then next time I come to your restaurant, I can pay on a different blockchain address, so that it's not identified from the outside, but to the same identity, because now we did an handshake with your identity.
And then because all of these layer 2s, no, not layer 2s, these different security models are being collaborated by people who know each other and that gravitate around these physical hubs and these informal guilds of Bitcoin builders. They are highly compatible. For example, silent payments can be on Bitcoin, can be on Ark, can be on Liquid, can represent all these things. So, you're going to have scanning someone's QR code, that will have his LNURL voucher address, also his styling payments, also, and as we mentioned, you will scan someone's QR code, and then maybe it's Capay Join, maybe it's Lightning, maybe it's Liquid, maybe it's Ark, maybe it's a Lightning channel open over Ark within a pay join, and then
Or just follow me on Nostr.
yeah, or just follow me on Nostr, and it's just gonna the person will get paid. That's all. That's all. Ultimately, people care about. They want to get paid, and they don't want to get
basically,
robbed.
yeah, it's our experience with the internet, right? Our browser is not asking us, do you really want to go from a pure IP packet exchange to a TCP connection over the fly? Are you using a local IP with the net with your router? We don't know. Address, human readable address, which we still, that's tricky, but we are also working on that. Human readable address, which the browser will figure it out. Then you may have like a green lock to say this is more secure, or caution, this is not secure. But you don't have to know the engineering depths of the internet to just enter and link in a browser.
Big fan of innovation at the app level to solve protocol problems, just like you mentioned that browsers are doing very
And also,
well.
your comment about ossification.
Yeah.
The internet didn't ossify in 1983 at 1984 because the internet is clearly changing today, social media, everything, Bitcoin itself. But the IP protocol, the base format of the IP packets, ossified completely in 1984. Now maybe the sixth version is coming along, but it's very, very hard. So for 50 years, the internet ossified at the base protocol. That doesn't mean the internet ossified. Same with Bitcoin. Even if we don't change the validity format of a Bitcoin transaction from the block inclusion point of view, Bitcoin will evolve and change. The code and the UX, the infrastructure, the libraries, everything.
Yeah, and that's what annoys me the most about the ossification debate, because people are confusing ossification of, as you mentioned, the protocol versus ossification of the Bitcoin experience, right? And the way that people interact with Bitcoin. So
Or the protocol stack. There are other protocols, many other protocols that are not just block validation. There's the peer-to-peer level, there's the mempool, there's everything.
Are we going to have this discussion for the next 20 years also? Are we going to have to fight the narrative war? Okay, so let's talk about, because we keep having the same discussion, which is a great discussion, by the way. However, it's like, who are these people who are trying to convince that ossification is bad, right? Why do we still have to debate this when you and I both agree that it's very clear that at least some measure of ossification at the base layer is not a problem, because there's other layers and other applications and services that can solve this problem. So why are we still talking about ossification? Let's talk about up return. Let's talk about the shitcoiners. Let's talk about the spam. I don't know how to tackle this thing. I've actually kind of like removed myself from this debate because I find it so cringe, but we need to talk about it because everybody wants us to talk about it.
Yeah. First of all, my theory why are we still thinking about consensus changes that from a psychological point of view, it's natural that you are driven into trying to change the base layer of technology and society. The higher you go in layers, the more you are dependent on the choices of others. You are constricted by the choices of others. That's restricting for human creativity. So if you go to change the protocol, you feel like Satoshi. You are changing the base, the fundamental principles. That's dangerous, hard, probably not going to work anymore, but it's psychologically satisfying. While if you just change the UX, you may change the world even more, but you feel like you are depending you are standing on the shoulders of so many giants that you don't even see yourself. So I don't blame a developer. If I was a developer, maybe I will become one with vibe coding like you. I will feel the need to reinvent the foundations of the world, because that's natural. The point is that you have to be humble and to recognize that now the world needs you to fix the edges and not the foundations anymore. But again, since everybody is discussing that, let's go into the operator debate.
Okay, so how can I tackle that? Okay, so first question: do filters work? What is a filter, and do they work?
So many people don't know, but in Bitcoin we have two kind of rules to select a transaction. One is the validity rule, the set of validity rules, which decides which block we accept into our blockchain. And then we have another set of rules which are stricter, that are the mempool rules, which is about which transaction we do accept in our mempool, which is this kind of timeless limbo that where the transaction stay to wait to be included into a block. These second rules, the mempool policies, they are stricter. For example, you can mine in a block a valid transaction with a very, very small output of Satoshi, a dust transaction, but you cannot send it to my mempool because it will reject it. Now, the Bitcoin software, all the Bitcoin software implementation, starting from Satoshi's one Bitcoin core, for all the existence of Bitcoin, had a lot of restrictions in the mempool that are stricter than the validity rule in order to basically protect nodes from DDoS attacks and spam and many things. Now, there is a debate emerging since a few years that says that if the transaction in the mempool, even if against your policies, because may be bad for many reasons, is going to be mined, keeping it out of the mempool is irrelevant. Actually, you're just hurting yourself because you don't estimate the fees correctly. You may have more problem in mempool propagation. So the idea, especially by Peter Todd, but also many others, which also connects with the full RBF debate, is the mempool should be basically equal to the blocks. So if something is going to make it in the block, don't keep it out of the mempool. That's a waste of time. That's not the way Bitcoin Core works so far. But what happens, at least this is my view, but I'm also correct. What happens is that this was the philosophy of Bitcoin Core forever. It's a pragmatic philosophy. You cannot keep everything out because even if somebody is spamming, if they corrupt a miner to include it in a block, you will have to accept it anyway. So at this point, you cannot do anything. But at least you can increase the friction. So if everybody is running some kind of mempool filter, and the spammer has to actually negotiate with the miner of band, that will create additional friction and will increase the cost of spamming. That's enough to discourage some of these things. What happened is that a few years ago, two things happened. First, the deployment of the Taproot soft fork opened unintentionally, and that's clear for any kind of historical analysis, a new attack surface to include stuff in the mempool that were filtered before. So you had this parameter which is called data carrier size, and you can set it. But with the Taproot, this kind of mempool policy was basically bypassed in the witness of the transaction. This opened up an unforeseen and unpredictable kind of spam attack surface. And what happened is that for human reasons that I can understand, some of the developers in charge of maintaining the code, they didn't decide to basically own the mistake and say it was a mistake. They merged with the legit theory that we could stop filtering because that's distortive, and they say, no, you see, this is not really a bug, because even if it was not predicted, this is actually good that we go in that direction. So instead of fixing a real bug, they changed the documentation on Bitcoin Core to pretend that the bug was a feature. And that triggered a series of reactions. For example, by my side, I was always sympathetic of the theory that mempool equal block is maybe a more sustainable way to go, because the other one is a cat and mouse game, which is hard to do. Instead, to defend that mistake, we went into philosophical, creepy discussions about what is even spam anyway, is subjective.
What is Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin money? Is Bitcoin a database?
Yeah,
and now we're being, it's a big red herring about what is Bitcoin anyway?
It reminds me of Bitcoin Cash. You remember that, so for people...
Bitcoin is subjective, you know?
Yeah, but the use of the word, like in the word, cash is not something easy and fast and cheap to transmit. Actually, if I send credit, that's instant. If I send cash, I have to use Western Union, it's expensive and slow. For Roger Ver, cash was instant and cheap. And then they started to use the word cash in a way that nobody else in the world would use. Same with spam. In the world, spam is whenever I receive something that I don't like on a protocol, it's spam. When I receive a spam email, that's a valid email. It's following the email protocol. But I don't like it, so I call it spam. In Bitcoin, suddenly, it's not spam if it's valid by the protocol. Well, then then spam cannot exist. So we are redefining the words. So I think that the actual technical discussion is not even that hot, because myself, I'm not even really agreeing with Luke that I'm certain that the filtering model will survive forever. And I may agree with Peter that maybe it's time to to move our attention into some kind of deeper issue about mining centralization and stuff like that. So it's not about the topic itself. It's about governance at this point. It's about the set of developers that started to disregard any concerns by other developers or protocol stack developers or users, and including power users, because basically this is like a typical echo chamber phenomenon. So you have this kind of crazy discussion. The last PR is not so heated because of return, but because there was Bitcoin mechanics being marked as abuse, just to discussing the topic. And then Daniela Brozzoni, who was a core contributor working here, she knocked the proposal, and everybody's going around saying all the contributors agree. So she doesn't exist.
Yeah.
She's a contributor. She knocked, she doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Then there was another speaker here, Tartaku, he made a very motivated stuff, and he was marked as spam. Ironically, that was objectively spam. And then they closed down the discussion, and then they reopened it well, that's another interesting point. So we were discussing about physical hubs. They closed down the GitHub discussion, but then somebody in the office of, I assume, I don't know, Chain Collapse, physical office, because as we said, physical meeting, in-person meetings means friendship and trust that can be abused.
Yeah.
It can be an attack vector itself. So somebody in a physical office somewhere decided to reopen the GitHub just to let an hack comment go in and then close it again.
Yeah.
So myself, I don't give fuck about op return.
Yeah.
But that kind of governance problem is a problem if we want to market Bitcoin Core as the reference implementation, which if you go away from, you are putting the network at risk. If the narrative is, this is one implementation, use it or not. By the way, Lightning Network sadly is running on BTCD, which is a implementation that crashes all the time, which is not a good thing. Miners are running custom patches of Bitcoin Core, which is just as well maintained as Knots, in the sense that it's just one guy maintaining the fork within mining pools. So it's the same as Knots. So if we say Bitcoin Core is the implementation, and if you go away, you are crazy, you are responsible, then you are saying that this is a strategic asset that should stewarded with the maximum level of tact, of sensitivity, of attention, of neutrality. If you treat it as the playground of a New York office, that's fine, but don't be mad at people just moving away.
Yeah, and I think the problem is that the stewards of this strategic asset evidently do not share the views and ideologies of at least a significant majority of Bitcoin users, and this was brought to light with this thing where, if we have a bunch of core developers that are strictly fixing bugs and improving non-sensitive aspects of the wallet, for example, or of the implementation of the protocol, that issue can be kind of forgotten because they agree, we agreed, everybody is a big kumbaya, but because this smaller faction of this separate echo chamber doesn't agree with the larger echo chamber, which I think is a probably accurate description to say that this idea of spam is subjective, and these ideas of even and again, I agree with you so much because I also saw the Greg Maxwell posted on the mailing list, and when you see Gmax jumping in, you're like, okay, you read it, and I saw his post, and his post is like, it does make sense that the mempool and the blocks are aligned, and if we have a theoretical discussion, it's probably an argument that I can be convinced with, but there's a lot of ad hoc rationalizations that I see, and that's what triggers me, and that triggers a red flag, because and also has to do with, as you say, like Taproot, the spam, was it a mistake, was it not a mistake? It's kind of like
another thing. Sorry,
Yeah.
there is I'm moving to tinfoil hat
Okay, go for
territory
it.
here, but I have the strong impression that if the spam attack with the shitcoin memes and that kind of stuff was coming from the Ethereum Foundation, most developers will have had no problem into fixing that. But since the spam attacks were coming from people very close to a guy that was a chain code guy, very close with other guys, by this reason, which is still physical proximity kind of bias, suddenly is not really spam if it's our friend do it. So yeah, maybe the quantum cats are shitcoins, but they hired our friend, so they cannot be real shitcoins, and that's a problem. And we discussed that probably a lot
These
in the
guys
past
were
years.
these guys were very very smart in their hiring strategy.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And impressive level of sneakiness, if not maybe outright malice in there. But and you know. I'm trying to have this discussion with people about, okay, first, filters didn't work. So, you know, can we filter out the ordinals? Filters don't work. Now the discussion is, filters work so well that the spammers are going to directly connect themselves to the mining nodes, and that's a problem.
Which one?
Which one is it?
Quantum filter,
You are-
Schrödinger filters.
You're arguing if you are arguing both, which people are doing within the span of 2 years, it's because there is there's something else going on, and these are two different ad hoc rationalizations that you are whipping out when it's convenient. And you know, the argument for me, it's like, how many UTXOs in the world are just at the dust limit level? Is that a fucking coincidence? You know, there is, and another one that I found hilarious is, I actually had a problem at Bull Bitcoin in our wallet, which was that if you have 25 unconfirmed transactions, the 26th one will not be included in mempools. It is a standardless rule. It's called max ancestor count or something like that, very obscure. And because Bull Bitcoin is running a bunch of different wallets and different implementations and sometimes different settings, we actually had like Bitcoins, I don't know exactly, I can't remember, but disappear because they weren't showing up on the mempool or this or that. And we were like, what's going on here? And then we realized, oh shit, like we are creating non-standard transactions, right? And then, and that's a problem because they're not being relayed. And so this standard rules completely works, and works so well that I was looking at old IRC chats, and you have, interestingly, you have the people who are running Bitcoin Core, Gloria and Newberry, and they're having an IRC discussion less than a year and a half ago about this wonderful filter.
How well it's working.
And discussing why is it 25? Maybe it should be this, maybe it should be that. So we are tweaking, and this is a very serious discussion about tweaking the filter, understanding the filter, why it works. And this is like a PR review club post. And I'm like, okay, guys, like there is cognitive dissonance happening here by very, very smart people. So there might be something else going on. Might be something else related to people being friends, financing from shitcoin companies.
Because the UTXO management, a very influential Bitcoin and continuous company.
Yes, so people are scornful of, there's a reaction by these illiterate, angry maxis,
screaming monkeys,
so conspiracy theorists, and okay, but there's a lot of coincidences, there's a lot of ad hoc rationalizations, and like there's a lot at stake.
And even if we're wrong, it's very healthy that
healthy.
Bitcoiners are questioning the motives, including the economic and financial motives of Bitcoin core maintainers. So we didn't force you to take this job. This job comes with the cost of having the responsibility of a strategic asset. So now people will question your motives, and if you don't like it, just move to work on your private implementation or to some kind of UX project where we will not care who is paying you or where you're friend with or what are your motivation. I mean, it's like you are entering the core of the nuclear launch buttons, and you wonder why people are wondering what are your motivations.
Yes, and luckily, it's a very serious topic, and it's a very important topic, like Bitcoin governance, and there's a lot at stake because I think you will agree, and most people will agree in Bitcoin, maybe not all core developers actually, which is interesting, that if Bitcoin collapses, it's the fucking end of the world, okay? And I sincerely hope that all core developers share this belief. I don't think that's the case, but I think some of them are more interested in interesting technological problems. But if Bitcoin collapses, it's the fucking end of the world. So it is obviously the most important topic in the world. However, I'm not that concerned on a short term that, you know, even if Bitcoin Core goes rogue, or, you know, there's enough level of decentralization where, of course, we have other implementations, and all of this anyway can only be resolved with an actual fork, right? So that's in my view. It's like, guys, you know, I'm very sympathetic to the filtering argument. I was a filter boy right away, and then I decided to stop being a filter boy and focus on Bitcoin because it was driving me crazy, and I was, you know, on Twitter until 2 a.m. But ultimately, we do have a conflict resolution mechanism in Bitcoin, which is potentially, you know, I hope this doesn't happen, but maybe the filter people will propose a soft fork and it will be resolved.
I also hope it doesn't work though, because that's also an argument which is not even pushed by most of the people wanting filters. People wanting filters, they just want to fix the filters. And they say, if most of them at least, if we are wrong, fix the filters. Show us that we're wrong, and then we will just agree there is nothing to do.
But of course,
So
of course, they will work if they fix the filters.
that's the point.
Of course, it will work, and then it will work, but it's not supposed to work.
Exactly,
you know what I mean?
exactly.
It shouldn't work, but
you know,
it's
the interesting thing is that, for example, I a personal friend with Luke and Peter at the two extremes of this work, and I think it's a blessing that Bitcoin have both, because both are ideologically extreme in different reasons. Peter is something like with RBF. Peter is somebody that says, if this is not fully incentives compatible forever, we should stop it and go in the other direction. It's just like, even if something works in practice, if it doesn't, if it's not supposed to work in theory, Peter will fight it. And that's his thing. Luke will say, no, we can fix stuff with any kind of unintended consequence. We don't care. Like, we can just change the proof of work. We can do everything. So if filters don't work, just do a soft fork where where the receiver has to sign the output. So crazy stuff that will never happen. So having these two things at the opposite is a richness, and it's wealth for Bitcoin. The problem is that you have to have these crazy guys, these crazy mavericks, these 11th men all around. It's great, but then you have to have a process, a political process within Bitcoin Core that will not follow one of this craziness, full on doubling down, calling everybody else crazy. So typically you had this kind of Mexican standoff in which back then in the days you had SIPA and GMAX being somehow like reasonable, and then Peter, sometimes it will make sense, sometimes he will propose inflation, changing the supply, and everybody will say, okay, you're crazy. Then Luke will say, maybe we should go to a complete redesign of okay, this is too much, we cannot change proof of work. So this is an equilibrium that was also including crazy people and strange ideas. Right now, the problem is that many users don't recognize the governance of the repository as kind of neutral and in between and balanced across these different instances anymore.
awesome to see, actually, with a little bit of a detachment and stoicism when you've been in Bitcoin for a very, very long time. That's why I'm not so concerned about. A lot of people are like, oh, but what if we don't get CTV? Is Bitcoin dead? If we remove up return, is Bitcoin dead? If we don't do this, is Bitcoin dead? And with a little bit of detachment, it's like we are very, very far from the Bitcoin dead scenario. And you know, guys like Luke would disagree. You know, no, Bitcoin is fucked if we don't change the proof of work and stuff like that. But most people with a lot of detachment, and you know, I think about some of my other Bitcoin friends, like Gigi, or you know, what you reach a kind of
Zen level.
yeah, it's the stoic. It's kind of like the stoic phase of Bitcoin, the Zen phase of Bitcoin.
Which is not complacence. It's not like we should do nothing. We still do things, but with peace of mind.
Yeah. No, complacency can be the death of Bitcoin, of course. I mean, if we don't have nodes watching the miners, you know, the nodes are not being complacent. So that's why we need nodes. They're automatically non-complacent actors in the system working on our behalf. But I think Bitcoin it will be fine. And the one thing that is that where this is not happening, and this is definitely not happening at the central bank. Okay, like this is definitely not happening at the international geopolitical order. This is not happening at Ethereum. This is not happening at Cardano. This is not happening anywhere else. You have these civil wars that are messy and bloody over size of blocks. Now we're not having a civil war, but we're having a very hard tribal, and every 8 years probably there's like some kind of, after two halvings, we need to air the dirty laundry, like the complacency of like a little in-group of developers in one side, and people being resentful that they're not being included, and that they're being gaslit by these people, with the Bitcoin Core and other kind of developers. This is normal that it happens every couple of halving cycles, as I don't know, people get bored. But just the fact that we are having this incredible heated debate around something innocuous like up return. What is the optimal data carrier size? I think it's like incredible, where if you ask a normie, like you talk to Bitcoin about a normie, and it's like, why is there 21 million Bitcoin? Like, what if we just decide to change that amount? Yeah. I'm like,
you cannot even change.
Do you even
rule?
Good
luck with that.
Of like the kind of shit we are fighting to war over.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But even like in Linux, I guess that if somebody, the Linux Foundation, wanted to push something bad in the kernel, there will not be so much
Of course.
Like Bitcoin, well, that's cyber hornets, right? Like sailors say that. Now they are going to bite sailors' ass as well, because they are cyber hornets.
And some of the more intellectual elite Bitcoiners, that may or may not be invested in a lot of shitcoin companies and keep that quiet. They are very scornful at the illiterate mob of fanatics that are. But I kind of like that we have some fucking fanatics ready to, potentially wear the explosive vest and press the button. It's a pretty nice hat to have.
Feature, not a bug.
I really don't encourage jihad, but it's nice to know that if ever there was some kind of major geopolitical thing where we do have a hard small core of radical people with an incredible amount of
that's a very
soul
good point.
In the game.
So if any core developers is watching us, they are not, because we are just screaming monkey and illiterate. Yes. But in case you are, think about the fact that if an intelligence agent was watching right now the operator debate, they are basically getting so depressed about sneaking anything into Bitcoin after the way we ignorant peasants are reacting to the very wise decisions you are making.
Yes,
that's beautiful.
Yes. All right. Well, I think this is it. Thanks, Giacomo.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
As always.